Shortly after British actor Anthony Hopkins had been chosen for a part in the film The Girl from Petrovka, he decided he ought to read the novel by George Pfeiffer, from which the screenplay was taken. He could not find it in a single London bookshop, however. Then, whilst waiting for a train at Leicester Square Underground Station, he caught sight of a book lying on a seat. Amazingly, it was the same novel. What is more, it had scribbled notes in the margin. As Hopkins later found out, a friend had once had, and lost, Pfeiffer's own annotated copy, and it was this very one that Hopkins had come across. Coincidences such as this certainly take one aback, and yet most of us have actually had an intriguing coincidence of some kind or another to relate. Bumping into a long-lost friend in some unexpected situation, thinking of someone of whom immediately telephones, humming a tune and then hearing it on the radio seconds later, or perhaps even coming across an individual with your very own name, of whose life runs in parallel to yours. One such occurrence involved King Umberto I of Italy, of whom was dining with his aide in a restaurant in Monza, where he was due to attend an athletics meeting the next day. With astonishment, he suddenly noticed that the proprietor looked exactly like him. Speaking to him, he discovered there were other similarities too. The restaurant owner was also called Umberto. Just like the king, he had also been born in Turin, on the same day, in fact, and he had married a girl called Margherita on the same day that the king had married Queen Margherita. He had also opened his restaurant on the same day that King Umberto was crowned. The king was intrigued and invited his double to attend the athletics meeting with him. But the next day, the king's aide informed him that the restaurant owner had died that morning in a mysterious shooting. As the king expressed his regret, he too was shot dead by an anarchist in the crowd. But not all coincidences need be so grim and grand. In fact, some of the most striking of them involve the most commonplace objects or occasions, such of that of which was experienced by the Chicago newspaper columnist Irv Kupcinet, of whom had just checked into the Savoy Hotel in London, and upon opening a drawer in his room, found to his astonishment that it contained personal belongings of a friend of his, Harry Hanning, of whom then was a player with the Harlem Globetrotters basketball team. 2 days later, he received a letter from Harry, of which began with the words, "You'll never believe this." Apparently, Harry had opened a drawer in his hotel room in Paris, and found there a tie, of which had the name Irv Kupcinet written upon it. It was a room that he had stayed in a few months earlier. Yet another strange coincidence occurred on Sunday the 6th of August 1978, when the little alarm clock that Pope Paul VI had bought in 1923, and for 55 years had woken him up at 6 every morning, rang suddenly and loudly. But it was not 6 o'clock. The time was 9:40 p.m. For no explicable reason, the clock had started ringing as the Pope lay dying. Later, a Vatican spokesman commented, "It was most strange," he said. "The Pope was very fond of this clock. He bought it in Poland and always took it with him on his trips." Many such examples of coincidences seem to defy all logic, luck, or reason. It's not surprising, therefore, that the theory of coincidence has excited scientists, philosophers, and mathematicians for more than 2,000 years. Running like a thread through all their theories and speculations is one theme. Do coincidences have a hidden message for us? But only in this century have real answers been suggested. Answers that strike at the very heart of established science and prompt the question as to whether there are powers in the universe of which we are still only dimly aware. Early cosmologists believed that the world was held by a principle of wholeness. Hippocrates, known as the father of medicine, of whom lived at some time between 460 and 375 BC, believed the universe was joined together by hidden affinities, and he wrote, "There is one common flow, one common breathing, and all things are in sympathy." According to this theory, coincidence could be explained by sympathetic elements seeking each other out. Similar beliefs have continued, in barely altered forms from those early days. The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer, for instance, defined coincidence as the simultaneous occurrence of causally unconnected events, and he went on to suggest that simultaneous events run in parallel lines. These events, although links in totally different chains, nevertheless fall into place both, he said, so that the fate of one individual invariably fits the fate of another. The idea of a collective unconscious, an underground storehouse of memories through which minds can communicate, has been debated by several thinkers. One of the more extreme theories to explain coincidence was put forward by the British mathematician Adrian Dobbs in the 1960s. Dobbs coined the word cytron to describe an unknown force of which probes, like radar, a second dimension in time, of whose nature was probabilistic rather than deterministic. The cytron, he claimed, was capable of absorbing future probabilities and could then relay them back to the present, bypassing the normal human senses and somehow conveying the information directly to the mind. But the first person to actually study the laws of coincidence was Dr. Paul Kammerer, director of the Institute of Experimental Biology in Vienna. From the age of 20, he had kept a logbook of coincidences in his own life. Many were essentially trivial, names that kept cropping up in separate conversations, successive concert or cloakroom tickets with the same numbers, or a phrase in a book of which kept reoccurring in real life. For hours, Kammerer also sat on park benches, recording people of whom wandered past, noting their sex, age, dress, and whether they carried walking sticks, umbrellas, or other such items. After making the necessary allowances for factors like rush hour, weather, and time of year, he found that the results broke down into clusters of numbers, of a kind familiar to statisticians, gamblers, insurance companies, and opinion pollsters. Kammerer called this phenomena seriality, and in 1919 he published his conclusions in a book called The Law of Seriality. Coincidences, he claimed, come in a series or a reoccurrence of clusters of time and space, where the individual numbers in the sequence are not connected by the same active cause. Coincidence, suggested Kammerer, is merely the tip of the iceberg in a larger cosmic principle that mankind, as yet, hardly recognizes. Like gravity, it is a mystery. But unlike gravity, it acts selectively to bring together in space and time things of which possess some affinity. We thus arrive, he concludes in his book, at the image of a world mosaic or cosmic kaleidoscope, of which in spite of constant shufflings and rearrangements, also takes care of bringing like and like together. This of course being something that has seen a great resurgence in modern times with new thought movement such as the law of attraction, the idea that like attracts like, by focusing the mind on a specific item, way of being, or desire. You can bring, slowly but surely, manifestations of it into your life like it was meant to be. In fact, an extraordinary number of people report these coincidences when searching out information in libraries, something that happens so much that Arthur Koestler, who wrote extensively on coincidences, coined the term library angel to describe. This library angel was a somewhat mysterious force that somehow leads individuals straight to the right book. Dame Rebecca West, for example, describes how she was once confronted with whole shelves of works concerning the Nuremberg trials at the Royal Institute of International Affairs, but the method of cataloguing was of no help at all to her particular piece of research. She even complained to one of the librarians, and demonstrated her problem by pulling out a volume at random. Not only was it the actual volume she needed, but she had opened it at precisely the right page for the data she needed for her work. In his book, Coincidence, a Matter of Chance or Synchronicity, Brian Inglis, writer and researcher into the paranormal, also describes broadcaster Alistair Cook's experience with this library angel. Pulling down a volume from a shelf, he noticed that he had unfortunately picked the wrong book. In fact, it was on a different subject altogether. The Good Food Guide for 1972, of all things. However, he immediately realised that it would be just what he needed for a programme on the subject of inflation that he had to record in a few days' time, and was able to find references to meals costing £3 to £4, thought to be expensive at the time the book was written. Investigators are still puzzled by the nature of this phenomena. Is there truly an angel, a spirit, in the library? Or is it pure serendipity, happy chance, the finding value in random happenings and occurrences? A great leap forward in coincidence research happened when two of Europe's most brilliant minds collaborated to produce the most searching book on the powers of coincidence, one of which was also to provoke controversy and attack from rival theorists working in the field. These two men were Wolfgang Pauli, whose daringly conceived exclusion principle earned him the Nobel Prize for Physics, and the Swiss psychologist and philosopher Carl Gustav Jung. Their book was titled Synchronicity, an acausal connecting principle, and it was described by one American reviewer as the paranormal equivalent of the nuclear explosion. According to Pauli, coincidences are the visible traces of untraceable principles, and Jung elaborated that whether they come singly or in series, they are manifestations of a barely understood universal principle, of which operates quite independently of the known laws of physics. Interpreters of the Pauli-Jung theory have even concluded that telepathy and precognition are also manifestations of a single mysterious force at work in the universe that is trying to impose its own kind of order and discipline on the utter chaos and confusion of human life. But of all recent investigators, none wrote more enthusiastically about the theory of coincidence than Arthur Koestler, the same researcher to coin the term library angel, of whose fascinating book, The Roots of Coincidence, summed up the phenomena in a few words with the vivid phrase coincidences are puns of destiny. And he went on to describe them as the chance encounter of two unrelated causal chains, which miraculously, it seems, merge into a significant event. Coincidences abound all over the world. You've probably even had them yourself, and they too could be a significant event, even if their actual worth was bafflingly small. They may have made you pause, think about our relationship with the universe, what we know and do not know about its mysteries and marvels. Is there really nothing more to these experiences than mere coincidence?